Chapter 15. A Close Shave. Friday the 1st of September, 1939. Friday morning dawned clear and sunny like every day that week. The grown-ups called it an Indian summer. It certainly made things much easier with the zoo. How would they get all the pets out for fresh air if it rained every day? As Tilly brushed her teeth, she looked out of the open bathroom window. Sunlight dappled the ground between the trees. Everything was still and quiet, except for the clop of the milkman's horse from the street and the clunk of the milk bottles on doorsteps. But from tonight, the whole country would be in blackout. Evacuations started today in London, and she heard on the news that the French had already sent thousands of children out of Paris. If the whole world is blacked out, how would anyone find their way home, she wondered. A man in the queue in Woolworths had said, "It's all very well not showing any lights, but the Thames will be lit up like blooming Christmas tree when there's a moon, won't it? So the German bombers won't get lost," she thought with a shudder. At least they lived a few miles from the river. Maybe the planes would run out of bombs before they could get to West London. But she didn't hold out much hope. After breakfast, Dad said, I want your help in the garden this morning. My shift starts a bit later at the works." Tilly gave a big sigh. When on earth can I get to the zoo and feed the pets? She thought as she went outside. Dad was pushing the spade into the hard earth by the fence, his big leather boots looking like a poster in Donald's window, "Dig for Victory." It made Tilly grin as she started to pull up some weeds. Mid-morning, Mum called them in for elevenses. Dad went in ahead, but then, when Tilly came through the back door calling out, "Any cake left?" there was no one in the kitchen. What's happened? She wondered, washing her hands at the sink. Then she went down to the hall to the sitting room. Mum and Dad were listening to the wireless, and as the last tones died away, Dad switched the dial off, and they all stood there in silence. The kettle had begun to boil on the gas, and a slow whistle could be heard from the kitchen. Still no one moved. Then Dad said, "It's the beginning, Mother." His eyes were dark with worry, and Tilly slapped her hands in his, feeling frightened but not knowing why. Dad squeezed back, his broad, comforting hand reassuring, as always, but his face didn't lighten. Something terrible had happened, but Tilly was too scared to ask what. Mum wiped her hand across her forehead and with a worried sigh walked off to the kitchen. Tilly and Dad following. They sat down at the table and watched Mum lift the kettle off the gas and pour water into the big brown teapot. "Oh, Wilf," she said. "What's beginning?" asked Tilly in a tiny voice. "Germany invaded Poland at dawn this morning, said Dad. Mum poured out tea and cut slices of cake. "I still don't understand," thought Tilly, but she was too scared to ask. Dad spooned sugar into his tea and stirred it around and around until Tilly thought he would never stop. Then he said, "The Prime Minister told Germany that if they won't withdraw from Poland, then we'll declare war. I'm surprised he hasn't done it already." "Do you want him to?" asked Tilly. "Of course. We all do. Ted Bow, Donald, and even Bert Scudder with his rotten chest." Dad's eyes narrowed and he leaned towards Tilly. "If we let Hitler get away with this, he'll bomb us anyway. Think we're too chicken to stand up to him. We have to go over there and give him a proper bloody nose. Let him know who he's dealing with, right, Mother?" "Yes, Wilf." But Tilly could see she wasn't happy. Dad might want a war, but Mum didn't, and I don't either, not really. Then Tilly remembered how Lottie had said in the bedroom. Mutie said Hitler's a wild beast. Nothing will stop him. "It's because of Hitler we had to set up the emergency zoo," Tilly reminded herself. "So yes, we must beat him. Otherwise all the pets in the world might die, let alone people." "If it's the only way to stop Hitler coming over here and bombing us, then I think we should declare war too," said Tilly. Dad gave her an approving nod, saying, "That's my girl, but you'll be evacuated next week with your high school friends." Evacuated. That word again. It was then that Tilly realised she had to be braver than she'd ever been in her life if she was going to keep her promise to Rosie. She pushed her chair back and stood up. "What now?" said Mum in an irritable voice. Tilly took a deep breath and steadied herself. She couldn't meet Dad's eyes, so she looked down at the tablecloth. "Dad, Mum, Megan has told Rosie she won't let her be evacuated, and Rosie is so terribly sad. She can't bear to be parted from me because we're almost like sisters and—" "What on earth are you talking about, you silly girl?" snapped Mother, brushing crumbs off the tablecloth into her hand. Her parents didn't even seem to be listening. Dad was finishing his piece of fruitcake. He'd leave for work in a few minutes. Please, Dad, Tilly went on in a trembling voice. This is just as important as the war. Her father frowned, but he looked up. But seizing her chance, Tilly rattled out, I want you to tell Megan she must let Rosie be evacuated with me. I promised Rosie we'd stay together in the war. I can't break my promise. How dare you speak to your father like that? Cried out Mum, banging the kettle back onto the hob. We'll hear nothing more of what you want, miss. I want, don't get. Tilly felt tears spring into her eyes, but she cried out, No, Mum, I won't leave without Rose. Before she could say anything else, her mother slapped her hard across her bare legs. It stung so much Tilly let out a sharp cry. She had to bite her lip to stop tears spurting out. For a moment no one moved, as if frozen in time, staring down at the table. The tension in the kitchen was like something Tilly had almost reached out and touch. It seemed to settle on everything, layering scum over the surface of their freshly poured tea and creeping over the fruitcake. The war's like a fiery dragon or a monster with no face, she thought with a shiver. It's going to eat us all up and there'll be nothing left. You'll be leaving first thing Tuesday morning, said Dad as he pushed back his chair and ran a hand back through his hair, which he always did when he was worried or annoyed. It's up to Megan what she decides for Rosie, and I won't hear another word about it. Now go to your room. Tilly went out of the kitchen and upstairs. She lay on her bed, tears leaking out, missing Bonnie so much. If her little dog were there, she'd snuggle up and comfort Tilly, lick away her tears and soothe her red-hot patch on her leg where Mum had smacked it. Why, oh why, won't the grown-ups listen to us, thought Tilly. They think they're the only ones going to war, but the children will be at war too, and I can't leave Rosie all alone. It would be utter treachery. As tears continued to pour down her face, Tilly turned onto her side and fell asleep. She woke up with a start to hear voices in the hall, down the stairs. Straining to listen, she heard Dad say, Nothing would surprise me this week, Ted. Has the war started, she thought, and leaping out of bed, she went to the door and downstairs. Here she is, said Mum. Ted Bow was standing at the open doorway wearing an ARP uniform and big black Wellingtons, tin hat on his head and a whistle round his neck. Do we need to go to the shelter? Asked Tilly in an anxious voice. What for? Blustered Ted. We haven't declared war yet. Tilly gave a sigh of relief. She was shaking at the thought of all it starting up. How will I cope when it really does? She wondered. Ted says some men from the council had found evidence of pets being hidden in the old factories, said Dad, glaring at her. Now come on, Tilly, tell us the truth, mind. We can't have this nonsense going on at a time like this. Tilly felt her blood freeze. What do they know? What can I possibly say? Speak up, girl, said Ted. Nincompoop, Tilly nearly blurted out. Think, she told herself. Then she had a brilliant idea. Well, actually, me and Rosie hid Tinkerbell in the bushes behind the canal. You what? Roared Dad. How dare you defy me? Tilly was shaking in her shoes and she thought she'd get another slap. It was only Tinks and Rosie told Megan because she died. Rosie told Megan because she died. Tinkerbell, I mean. Oh, what a shame, said Mum. That was the kitten her mum gave her before she died. The men shuffled their feet and huffed a bit, and Tilly kept her fingers crossed behind her back that they wouldn't ask about Bonnie. In the factories? Asked Ted, frowning at her. I don't know anything about that. We're not allowed to play in there, said Tilly. Ted shook his finger at her and said, You make sure you tell all the children, including them Scudders, bunch of hooligans, to stay well away from the factories and come and tell us the minute you see any stray animals. The very minute. You understand me, young lady? Yes, of course, Mr. Bow, said Tilly, giving him her most serious look. Ted walked off with Dad, who had to go to work, and as she watched them go, Tilly thought, could war be more terrifying than having to outwit Mum and Dad and Ted Bow?